Nice to see you all. Okay, find a spot to sit. I'll get started. Hello. Oh, wow. What a great audience already. Thank you so much. This is such a great turnout. We're really excited to see all of your smiling faces tonight. It's a great way to brighten up a winter evening. And we'll get started. I'm excited for the turnout here. We also have about 19 people on Zoom. So hopefully everything works out with the sound and the technology for them. My name's Toba Tillinghast. I'm the director at Underwood Conservation District. And if you're with Underwood Conservation District, would you raise your hand? I don't quite mean in the district, but if you're with staff or board at the district, raise your hand. We've got Dan, we've got Joe, and James here in the room. So get to know us. Thank you. Yeah, get to know us. Underwood Conservation District has been around since 1940. So this is truly our 85th year this year. You are probably familiar with our winter workshop series since you're here tonight. We had a great lineup this year, as you can see on the right, starting off with a biochar workshop earlier in the winter. And last month we hosted Xerces Society, Matthew Shepard there at the library. And tonight we're thrilled to welcome James Cassidy from Oregon State University. And if you missed any of our past workshops, and including tonight, we're recording it. We're hoping everything works with that. But you can go to our website and find our past workshops and watch the recordings on a number of different topics. And then we always invite folks to sign up for our e-newsletter that goes out every other month. And it's a great way to keep in touch and stay on top of what we have going on. So for those of you on Zoom, I think you know the drill. This is just a reminder to keep people muted, raise your hand to speak, or add a question in the chat box. We're hoping to have Q&A throughout the evening and especially at the end. And just to introduce and reintroduce who we are at Underwood Conservation District, we're a local public agency. We have a local board of directors, including Joe here, recently re-elected to the board. We're a clearinghouse of information, all things natural resources. If you don't know where to go for your natural resource question, you can come to us, and if we don't have the answers, we can refer you to the nearest expert. We also do a lot of different projects. So depending on the subject and the funding at hand, we will try to get a project done with you. We're locally led, like I mentioned, we're non-regulatory, which really makes us unique, different from Department of Natural Resources or Department of Ecology, for example. We have a great staff of 10 now who have lots of different types of subject matter expertise, all things natural resources related. And just to orient you to our area, our neck of the woods, we're the only conservation district that gets to span both the west and the east sides of the Cascade Mountains. So we're pretty lucky with that, having such a variety of wonderful natural resource environments that we work with. And here's our district boundary. You can see that we are made up of all of Skamania County and western Klickitat County, west of the Klickitat River. Here's a long list of the different types of subject areas and programs that we have. It can come and go, ebb and flow based on our grants that we have and the funding we have. So come talk to us if you're interested in any of these projects or programs. The Farm Tool Library happens to be located right here at the Grange down below. So if you haven't visited us there, the start date for opening is March 14th. So mark your calendars. We'll have open hours starting March 14th. And before that, by appointment, so don't be shy. And if you don't know where we are, our office is over in the Park Center building right here in White Salmon. And you might recognize this mural because that was a really fun project we did just a year ago. We painted this mural with artist Jessica Vollendorf, a local artist in White Salmon. And we've had over 100 students visiting the mural from the schools nearby, learning about the natural resource features and landscape icons in the mural. And we just put in the sign that you see here with Twin Oaks as the metal fabricator, we put in this little kiosk where you can scan the QR code and learn more about the mural, and also download all kinds of lesson plans and materials about this mural, just to share the knowledge around it. So again, I mentioned we're turning 85. Keep a lookout for a celebration or two. We'll try to celebrate throughout the year. I know we'll be celebrating at Tree Fest coming up March 22nd. That's coming up real soon with our plant sale as usual. And we're gonna keep talking a little bit more about that. So James, why don't you make a few minutes?
Thank you, Taylor. Yeah, so Tree Fest is gonna be March 22nd, right at Ryan Garden Park, right outside our office. It's gonna be a fantastic celebration of everything conservation. We do a native plant sale where everyone picks up all their native plants from pre-orders. We are still running our pre-order sale until the end of February, so it's about a week and a half left. If anyone wants to look for, see what's still available online. If not, some neighboring CDs have available plants still. And this fall, we're actually gonna be doing our second annual Hemlock Heritage Fest up in Stabler. Hemlock. So it should be a good time. So this is kind of a little snapshot of some of the plants we're growing up there, which is gonna be a fantastic collaboration with local nurseries, with volunteers and everything. So we're growing our own and having a great time doing it. So if anyone wants to volunteer, we have a lot of work parties, potting up, pruning, all kinds of stuff. So Toby kind of mentioned it real quick, but we do have the food and farm tool library, which is just right downstairs for our food preservation aspect. And we have our shed outside that has all of our farm tool equipment. Very small stuff from shovels up to larger equipment like seed drills, we have a manure spreader, we have a chipper, rototiller. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to reach out. I will have some cards in the back, and there's a lot of information that regards to that. You can kind of see some of the equipment we have here. One last thing before I hand it off to Dan is we will be doing soil samples, free soil samples. So March 14th is our first day opening the farm tool library. So if anyone wants free soil samples, reach out and we can get those analyzed for you. And then the drop off will actually be downstairs here. So any questions, just let me know.
Where do you get those animals?
We sent them over to A&L Labs over in Portland.
Good one.
It works.
So we just bring soil in?
Yeah, feel free to reach out, and I have a link for the website too that has all the specific information, but if anyone has any specific questions, just let me know. I can go over specifics of how to collect it, how much, when, a lot of different things. So anyway, here's Dan Richardson.
Thank you, James. Thanks, James. Crop Talks. Some of you might be interested in one of our programs called Crop Talks. It's growing season or worm season on farm tours. So it's farmer centric and farm friendly and sort of farmer adjacent. We do this in partnership with Gorge Road. So these tend to be small and medium sized farms on both Washington and Oregon side of the river. You go to our website, ucdwa.org, or if you pick up one of our cards in the back, which has our contact information, you can sign up for our newsletter. We'll keep you in the loop. And if you have any interest in growing things, plants, soil, or the people that work with those, I highly recommend participating in it. It's just a really good time. Another program that we have that may be of interest is called Yard by Yard. It's a backyard habitat program. Here's some pictures of folks locally that have really gotten into this and grown a variety of native plants, but also some other conservation features. And we have a checklist. It's sort of a self-certified, or it's a self-paced certification program where we come and we can do a before and after tour. So give people some thoughts and answer some questions that might be interested in turning a backyard or front yard or side yard or any modest sized piece of ground into something that's maybe a little bit more biodynamic or biodiverse, I should say. And you can check that out again online or reach out and we can point you in the right direction. And all this is really good stuff. I encourage you to follow it. But of course, we're here tonight to learn about soil, and we're here to listen from fellow James Cassidy. James has been teaching at OSU, Oregon State University, for more than 20 years. And has an introduction class with more than 100 people on average. He says it can change lives. I hope so. I hope that we get to have some of that this evening, and I'm looking forward to it. He is also the founder, the faculty advisor for OSU's Organic Growers Club and a student-led farm there that has helped more than 20,000 people over the years get their hands into the soil. It's a largely self-supported farm and even has a CSA. And one thing that's particularly interesting about Professor Cassidy is that he has a background in music. He's a well-rounded, sort of a Renaissance individual, if you will. People often describe his speaking style as dynamic and engaging, as we are about to see for ourselves. So please join me in welcoming Professor James Cassidy.
Wow, it's amazingly cool things going on here, like a lot. More cool things going on here than Corvallis, which I'm just saying, wow. Other because it's a little bit smaller community, so it's more, I don't know, it's just more engaged or something. But man, all that stuff's so great. Tola, thanks so much. And James, thanks a lot. I mean, it's such cool stuff. You can loan out tools and stuff. Man, so get a soil test. You gotta do that. If you're serious about actually growing stuff, you gotta know what you're growing it in, right? Anyway, my name's James Cassidy, and where's that clicker? I don't know where it is. I'm gonna show you that. Okay, thanks. So yeah, I grow vegetables. Been doing that for 25 years. I started the student farm 25 years ago. I teach too. The university pays me to do that. I teach introductory soil science classes, and I teach organic farming and gardening class. It's starting in a few weeks. It's got 75 students, and I recruit from that. And I teach a soil management class for organic production. That's what kicks their ass, and it's like a hard class. And then I teach a soils for teachers class. And really, my real gig is teaching at the student farm, which is I'm a volunteer. But I recruit from this farm to my classes and from the classes to the farm, and I've done that for 20 years, although we started the farm 25 years ago when 3 students complained. Undergraduate students complained about not getting any organic anything in any of their classes in agriculture or horticulture or whatever. And I said, start your own damn farm. And I said, ooh, good. So they started their own damn farm, but we had to find some land managers who were sympathetic to us, and we were super lucky. And they helped us kind of get this little piece. That wasn't particularly good for anything else, but it's really nice soil. It's like this sandy loam that has a little bit of clay in it. The clay it has in it is the good stuff. We're gonna get the clay tonight. Are we ready to go to school? Because we're gonna go in deep at some point here, okay? Anyway, so we started the farm, and then I went to their first meeting, and we started it. Oh God, it was awful. Because they wanted to use like Robert's Rules of Order. There were 5 of us. It was like, am I younger than you? Are you square or what? Anyway, they eventually went away, and new students came along. And now we've had over 25,000 students at the student farm in the past 25 years. And self-funded, we're still self-funded. The university doesn't support us. They kind of leave us alone because, it's after hours and now we go home and do their stuff. And so, at the beginning though, they tried to shut us down. The administrators and stuff. What are those kids doing out there? Oh, he's smoking weed, and like, what if somebody gets hurt, and all the reasons you could say don't do that. And they tried to throw us off 3 times. They never came out. They've never come out. Okay, thank goodness. And they tried to get rid of us 3 times and we just kept coming back. And all those people trying to get rid of us are either retired or dead now. And so now the dean is a customer, you know, so. So we just kind of waited for them to catch up with us, exactly. And it's actually 2 students who've taken my class in this room tonight. Would you please raise your hand? Come on, Rachel. Right here. In fact, row in my class. Probably did. Where did you sit? Where did you sit in my class? Right in front. Yeah, here's the A's. Here they are. Here's the B's. And here's the rest of us. Okay? This is where I was. I was a D- stoner rock and roller in high school. My counselor said that I wasn't college material. So anyway, just want to show you, this is a typical box for a CSA in the middle of summer, and I had to learn how to draw every one of those things and just through trial and error. So a little bit of credibility there, trying to get that. Anyway, so nice people, cool people. This is gonna be fun. We're interested in stuff. It's all about soil. Yeah. It's all about soil. And I don't just mean like growing vegetables or trees or look at those old trees in here, cool old Grange houses, look at this cool old building. I mean, it's all about soil. Every atom in your body has been through the soil billions of times already. The fact that you are not soil at this moment is a temporary condition. It's almost over, folks. Don't need this talk. I mean, most of the time, your soil. You come up here and say, hey, we go for you're back to normal. And yet, here we are, all together right now at the same time in the history of the cosmos. At this particular time in the history of the cosmos. Yow. Oh, man. And yet, and we're all here and we know stuff. When we actually know about plants and how things work, and man, even a couple 100 years ago, it was like, I'm not like this at all. And here we are together tonight in this cool Grange hall with like all kinds of really cool activities that happen in this place. Who manages all that? Who's running the Grange? Soil. Yeah, it was. Soil is. So anyway, and I don't know if you know this, but I mean, every atom in your body was once inside of a rock. And rocks dissolve in water. And most people never think about that. Most people don't think about anything real. We are going to talk about real stuff tonight. My goal is to change the way you see reality tonight. Okay, so buckle in. I actually happen to have some soil that I actually dug from just around this building. Beautiful soil. Here, look at this. I don't even know this, but a single pinch of soil has over 1 billion living organisms in it. In this pinch, right here, and in this pinch, and in this pinch, and every pinch of soil you ever encounter the rest of your life, I want you to think about this. In fact, before your head hits the pillow tonight, I want you in a private moment to go outside alone, get on your hands and knees and pick up a pinch of soil and say, 1 billion. And then turn to the nearest stranger and say, did you know that there are over 1 billion living organisms in a single pinch of soil? And it's not just 1 billion of one thing, there's tens of thousands of different species in here right now. Tens of thousands, and all kinds of things, and only about 0.01% of them do we know who they are or what they're doing. Most of we can measure them, we know they're there, but we can't study them as individuals. You take one out, you put it on our plate, and it's about 0.01% of them will grow and won't, because they live in a community structure. And that happened to have a rock here. my pocket. There's a rock, and I was like, great demo, Cassidy. Like you've seen rocks before. Here's a rock. And rock, oh, look at this. Okay. I actually won't be in this slide thing for a while. Rocks dissolve in water, and if you don't believe me, when you go home or when you have breakfast tomorrow morning, just take a little bit of table salt, which is a mineral. Rocks are just a collection of minerals, and minerals are chemicals. And put a little, and that table salt, sodium chloride, put a little on your hand here, just lick it. And that's a rock, a mineral that dissolves very fast. And some minerals dissolve really fast, and some minerals dissolve really slow, but they all eventually dissolve. And so, like, if I take this rock, yeah, I heard a over there. Very good. And that's a start. You got one. And if I take this little cup of water here, and I dunk this, and I mean, first thing to dissolve out of the rock is salt. So if I take this and dip this in here, and look at this, like a little bit, see, I don't know if you can see that, that's dissolving right now. A tiny bit of that. And the first thing to dissolve out of a rock are the what? Oh, salt. So a little bit of salt just dissolve out of it, really tiny amount, and it dissolved, and it's now on this floor. And eventually, somebody's gonna mop this floor, and it's gonna dissolve again. And it's gonna go to mop water, and they're gonna dump it down the drain, and it's probably a drain field here. I mean, it's probably not in the city, who knows, maybe it is. Either way, or they just dump it outside. And what's it gonna do? A little bit of salt's gonna move down, and it's gonna dry up this summer, and it's gonna crystallize, and it's gonna rain again, and it's gonna keep moving down. I'm pretty sure it's gonna go into the groundwater. Once it's the groundwater, it's gonna eventually end up in a little creek. The little creek's gonna go to the little river here, the little river's gonna go out to the giant river. And then that little bit of dissolved salt's gonna go down the river at about 7 miles an hour, we calculated today on the way up here. So it takes between 10 and 20 hours for the water that passes in front of you to go out of Astoria into the ocean. And that salt's gonna go out, and that's why the oceans are salty. Because the salts dissolve out of the rocks, and they end up in the drainages, and they go out into the ocean. And the next thing to dissolve out is the molybdenum, and the calcium, the phosphorus, and that's what nutrients are. They dissolve out of the rocks, and they go into solution, and then plants take them up at their roots, and then you eat them, or your mom did, or you ate an animal that ate plants, and that's how you are here. Every atom in your body was once stuck to the negative exchange complex of clay and or organic matter, was stored there against the flow of the water, was taken up by the roots of the plants, and then you ate them. And that's reality, man. We're getting to the rest of it. And then the last thing to dissolve out of a rock is the silicon dioxide. And that's what sand is. And sand ends up on the coast in large amounts. So if you want to see ancient, and everything else is in between. And there's different color rocks that have different mineral nutrients in them. And that's why there's different soils. I'll talk about it in a minute. So if you want to see ancient mountain ranges that no longer exist on this planet, because they've come and gone, whole mountain ranges, just go to the ocean. And just get down and taste the salts. And then lift up the skeletons of ancient mountain ranges, and that's what the sand is. And then everything else is in between. And that's what all this stuff is made of. So you're made of, inside of you is a giant secondary mineral made out of calcium in the shape of a human skeleton that's in you, holding up this giant structure. I would argue, you are soil now. You're a four-dimensional complex habitat, a self-organized natural body, a living thing made out of air, water, minerals, and organic matter. That's what you are. And that's what soil is. That's all the same thing. And yet here we are at this moment, like, you know, looking around and like, whoa, I mean, even, and how did those nutrients get into the shape of an eyeball? you know, so that you could see by something called DNA and RNA, which itself is made out of nucleotides that are made from dissolved rocks. I mean, once you start just looking at this, there's no going back. And it will change the way you see things. And you belong, alive or dead. And you will, I mean, talk about reincarnation, it's real, man. Anyway, so here's the rock. Remember that demo? So in a private moment tonight, go out into the onto the earth and get down and listen to it and smell it and feel it and take a pinch and say, 1 billion? Wow, whatever, however it works for you. And so, you know, and these different colors and the different size crystals in this rock determine the type of soils that form from them. And the big chunky white crystals in here, eventually this is gonna end up being, those little crystals, that one right there, is gonna end up on the beach somewhere. Sooner or later. And the dark colored crystals actually have the mineral nutrients that are really important for biological systems. And so dark colored rocks make better soils for biological systems. And what do we have around here? A lot of basalt. And what is basalt? A fine grained mineral that has lots of dark colored crystals in it. And that's why there's timber industry, and it's like there's fish in the streams and all that stuff. Because where does it come from? It's dissolved out of the rocks, ultimately, right? So we kind of talked about it. So there's different size particles, sand, silt, and clay size particles. Sand is anything from 2 millimeters down to 0.05 millimeters by size. It's called sand, no matter what it's made out of. It's mostly made out of silicon dioxide. Silt is anything from 0.05 millimeters down to 0.002 millimeters. Anything smaller than 0.002 millimeters is called clay. Different size particles, and different size particles have different, the mixture of those particles is something called soil texture, and you can just feel it. Pick up some soil and it feels kind of gritty. That means it has some sand in it. If you can kind of like sculpt it into a little, I don't know, into a little sculpture, it's probably got a lot of clay in it. And everything else in between is the silt. And different size, different ratios of sand to silt and clay determine the size of the pores in between the particles. And it's in the pores is where the activity in soil is. Where the activity in soil is where it isn't. It's in an empty space. That's where the water is. That's where the air is. That's where the roots are. That's where the bacteria. That's where the fungi. That's where the nematodes and all the things, the billions of the single fish. They don't live inside of sand, silt, and clay. They live in between the sand, silt, and clay. And soil is a self-organizing natural body. It self-organizes. We'll talk about that a little bit more, but if you ever dig a hole more than the depth of a tomato, and you should, once in your life, dig the hole as deep as you can until you just like are exhausted. Here you are. This is it, man. You get one shot at it. Get in the hole before you're in it forever. Dig your own grave. Why not? Almost over, folks. I don't need to stop. So we talked about soil is made of minerals of different size minerals, different nutrients come from it, and that different size pores. And I don't know if you know this, probably you've all thought about this. You take a bath or a shower tonight or whatever, you know that little bridge of water, it's like, what the hell? Kind of between your fingers, you've seen that, right? You've all seen it. It's like, why is that sticking there? And then because small pores hold water against the force of gravity, because of the laws because of cohesion and adhesion force that makes up capillary force. And small pores hold water against the force of gravity, and large pores drain into the force of gravity. Sandy soils drain into the force of gravity. Clay soils hold a lot of water because of the size of the pores. A loam, you've already all heard the term loam before, because it's good. But a loam is approximately equal parts sandstone clay, so that means it has equal parts sandstone clay sized pores, so that there's air in the soil, because the billions in a single pinch, they need to breathe air just like you do for the same reason you do. That's why a well-drained soil is good, because think about it, when a raindrop is going down a worm channel, being pulled down by gravity. What's being sucked in behind it? Air, right? So when the soil is draining, the soil is breathing. And then the small pores hold the water against force gravity. And when do plants need water at their roots? All the time. And when do plants breathe at their roots? All the time. Who here has ever drowned a plant? Come on. If you're not raising your hand, you're a liar. Okay? If you're not killing plants, you're not growing as a gardener. Ex-wife told me that. Anyway, so now we kind of know what soil is, at least physically, right? But we have to talk about the other thing. And the other thing is organic matter. Soil is made of minerals, different sized rocks, different sized pores, hold water, it has air, and all that. There's also organic matter. We have to talk about what that is. And I had some, I went and got some right outside this building. God, look at this rock. We just found this right up. Beautiful rock. Not a lot of nutrients in this rock. This is mostly silicon dioxide, actually, right? Here. Oh, this is beautiful. Look at that. This is like right under this tree. It's almost all organic matter. It's like alive in there, right? Oh my God. It smells like a river. Oh, nice. Go back here. Look, here's a stick. From the tree right out in front of this building. So we have to talk about this other thing. So this is organic matter. Organic matter is anything that was once alive or dead, but it was once alive. I mean, these are all trees here, right? At one time. Here's a stick. What is a stick from a tree made out of? Who's in that? You did, or this guy? I don't even already got my A already. Who said carbon? Gold stars. Most people don't even know this, okay? This is why things are the way they are, okay? Thank you. It's made out of carbon. It's made out of wood, which is made out of carbon. Carbon bonds. Right? And so, where did the carbon come from? Yeah, man, right over here. Okay. Yeah. But you know, only teachers can buy it. So I know what motivates people. Gold stars. Come on. We're not doing it for the gold star, the color. Oh, star, they're great now. Don't do that. Gold star, very nice. Joe. For Joe, right on. Now it's fun. Came from the atmosphere, from the air. And most people know that plants take in carbon dioxide and they exhale oxygen. No. Plants don't breathe the atmosphere, they eat it. They eat the atmosphere. And they build these structures out of the carbon from the carbon dioxide that's in the atmosphere, 0.03% or whatever it is. Tiny amount here, it's invisible, nobody believed in it at one time. Oh, never mind. Wanna go blue on you?
Yeah.
In this beautiful building. Sacred building, the Grange. And so what this is sort of like compressed CO2 or something kind of, not really, but carbon, a lot of carbon dioxide to make this little stick. The carbon bomb. But first, the carbon dioxide had to be taken apart and then put together into wood. Right? This is a bunch of tree here. And the tree, like took in the carbon dioxide and it took it apart, took the oxygen off, took the carbon, put it together with another piece of carbon together to build tissues like leaves, seed coatings, roots, and flower parts, and trunks of trees, bark, and everything. All of that was made from carbon mostly. That's what's mostly in there. And in order to build and take apart and put together something requires, that doesn't just happen. It requires energy to do that, to take this apart and put it together. And where does the energy come from to grow a tree? The sun will start for everyone. Breathe under your seat. So the sun is, look, 93 million miles away. There's a star that's giving UV radiation to this planet, and plants have figured out a way to use that energy to rip apart the carbon, rip apart the atmosphere to build tissues. Yeah. And so those tissues in the carbon to carbon bonds, and there's a photon that comes from 93 million miles away, and in the chloroplast, and it excites a electron, a higher orbital, and freaking drops down. Nobody really knows why I said words. But we kind of know, and some people know. And when that drops down, it releases a little bit of energy, which will be captured by a molecule called ATP, which is an energy storage molecule. So it has chemical energy in it that originated from the sun, and then that little molecule can drift around inside the cell, or maybe we moved around inside the cell deliberately and stuff, and it gets in the DNA structure now, and it releases that energy, rips apart carbon dioxide, and it goes another one, now put it there into wood. And that's how it does it. And in this wood, and in the carbon to carbon bonds in this stick, is the energy of the sun at the time of photosynthesis is in the stick in the form of chemical energy. And so that's called reduction chemistry. You probably all got any an exam once, but that's how they were good at getting an A. And I mean, the photosynthesis is the mother of all redox reactions on the planet Earth. All this energy, except some of the radioactive energy and some in the core of the earth and stuff like that, but still all this. The reason I can do this is because I eat food. And the oxidation chemical reaction happens when I put the food in my mouth and I release that energy so that every beat of your heart, every blink of your eye, every thought that you're having, every memory that you're having, that by the time I get to the end of the sentence, you still know what I'm talking about, is all energy that was harvested from the sun by plants that lived in soil. And those are actual facts. A giant solar system. So now this stick has its energy. And if I get this stick to 451 degrees, if I excite the molecules in this stick at 451 degrees, which is the temperature at which books burn, back in tracking. Current information in there. Because often in book is made out of wood. It's a piece of wood you look at and have a psychedelic experience, but it's still just a piece of wood. And if you get this excited enough, these molecules, it increase the activation energy necessary for a chemical reaction called oxidation to occur, which is called burning. But you gotta get it hot first, right? So you kind of friction or whatever you do, or something or whatever you do. And then all of a sudden it starts, and then it produces its own heat and light. In fact, I do have a demo. It's probably not allowed, but too bad. Stop me. Stop me. This is a piece of wood. This is once a tree from Brazil. Okay. That was magical, Brazil. And if I get this to 451 degrees, and I'm overcoming, that is the energy of the sun. Right there, right now, I can feel the heat, it's getting closer. Okay, I'm gonna put that on at some point here, oh, I'm gonna burn for you. Ow, 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 okay. Melting look at that, that literally is the energy of the sun. And if I were to get it really burning, put that out in the soil there. Keeper of all goodness. So, if I were to, add a bigger piece of wood and keep it going and burn it, let it get going. And because the energy is being released from it, continues overcoming the activation energy necessary for the oxidation reaction to occur because there's carbon bonds with advantage to the sun, and there's fuel in it. And then it goes out away. You notice how the wood goes away? Just keep putting one in there, it's like, it's empty, put more in there. Where's the wood going back to?
Air.
To the atmosphere in the form of carbon dioxide. The processes are reversing. Thank you. Frankenstein. Know that. So it goes back to the atmosphere, and the light and the heat is released as energy, and there's also water vapor you can't see because it's not in Minnesota, it's not cold and dry enough, but what comes out of and think about this. Well, it goes away. What's left over in the, I know this is a soil talk, really. What's left over in the fireplace after the fire is out the next morning? Ash. And what is ash? Minerals. The minerals that were taken up by the dissolved rocks to build the cofactors and the parts of the DNA and the phosphorus. I mean, every cell wall is made out of a phospholipid bilayer, a lot of phosphorus. And it's all stored in this old tree right here. And sooner or later, oh my God. Okay. And if you were to take that wood and you were to put it in a what happens to a compost pile? Goes away. Where's it going back to? CO2, water vapor, and heat. The heat that is generated is from the energy from the photosynthesis at the time of photosynthesis. And the compost pile gets smaller. You're like, wait a minute, I thought it was 451 degrees. No. That's because there's billions of bacteria and fungi that are in there. And what are they doing? What there are external metabolism. What the bugs are doing in the soil, in the compost pile, are releasing chemicals called enzymes that are catalysts, that are little molecules that say, hey, you don't have to get to 451 degrees, I'll help you. Do it at 52 degrees. And so they help that, they lower the activation energy necessary for the oxidation reaction called burning to happen at a lower temperature. It's happening in you right now. At about 97.5 degrees or whatever it is. Look, there's a hole here, and there's a hole here. And there's a tube going through your body. And that is the external world inside of there that's going through. And you're adding organic. You want to know what the answer is? Doesn't matter what the question is.
Soil.
You almost always add organic matter, but there's a verb attached to it. Add organic matter. What's the answer? Wow. Hold on, let's try this again. The answer is add organic. What's the answer? Add organic matter. Add organic matter. What you're doing is you're adding energy and carbon dioxide energy from the sun, and every beat of your heart is that energy being expressed. You are an expression of sunlight energy. You're just a big bag of wet rocks, and it's almost over. Well, we're having a good time. And there are bugs inside your gut, lining your gut, that are oozing out enzymes that are lowering the activation energy necessary for the oxidation chemical reaction to happen. So that, and how do you get a fire to burn hotter? How do you get a fire to burn hotter? You add oxygen, right? Everybody together, oxygen in. CO2 water vapor heat out. Oxygen in. CO2 water vapor heat out. This is forever until you're dead, okay? Every breath you take is to get oxygen to that oxidation chemical reaction to release, to break carbon and carbon bonds to harvest the energy so you can exhale CO2. Just feel the heat on your hand. Do it. That's it. Energy of the sun. You are an expression of sunlight energy, man. And just everything we know is the smoke trail of oxidation that's going off into the universe as heat. Comes in as UV radiation, leaves as infrared heat, and goes out to the absolute zero space. And yet here we are tonight in the school Grange Hall. Wow. This is awesome. Thanks for bringing me up here. Shit. I love this. Such cool people. So that's what organic matter is. And that's why you add it to your garden. Because you're feeding the bacteria and the fungi, and they're losing up the enzymes, and they're releasing the nutrients. Because they eat external to their body. So they're dissolving the stuff, they're slurping up some of it, and out a little bit, and that's what they're doing. But there's a little bit left over that gets the nutrients are kind of are left. And they get stuck onto the clay and the organic matter, they're stored there for the roots to take them up again, as they've done billions of times already. What comes out of the tailpipe of your internal combustion engine? CO2, water vapor, and heat, and ash. And where does that come from? Where does that energy come from? The sun, from ancient photosynthetics that was subducted into the earth and under high pressure and temperature became crude oil, and then they pump it up and then they destroy the planet. So, it's fun. Those who were here. So, okay, here's my clicker. There it is. The debris pile. So, kind of, those are important things that we had to talk about before we could go forward. Well, what soil is, really what it is. And we're gonna talk about how it works a little bit more. And first we'll get to the first slide. You ready? Soil, yeah. Good. Okay, thanks a lot. Now you know what it is, and it all flows from that. Everything. Look, there's a rocky planet in liquid water, rocky solid water, and there's a star getting radiation planet. Plants about figure out how to eat the atmosphere and take up the rocks, dissolve minerals, and that's how the world really works. And that's why you're here. And that is reality. And everything else is a complete fantasy. But the rest of it's just like craziness up here. We're just like, start basic principles. And build your life around that, we'll probably make it. All right. Look. Laser. Laser. Somebody invented the laser. You know why somebody invented the laser? Because of soil. Because somebody invented agriculture first. Yeah, agriculture was a human invention, a technology. I mean, it's not that long. I mean, even the most conservative estimates, what it take 30,000-40,000 years, depending on what you call agriculture. Still, what's that in the history of the earth? It's 4.5 billion, not even nothing. I mean, just nothing. It's just like very, very recent invention. And that invention, and it's probably people, because before that, people traveled with the animals and the seasons and stuff. And they kind of lived in small groups about this big. And they were sane. Because they kind of had to police each other a little bit, and the wisdom of the elders and all that jazz, and take care of the kids because they're the future. It's pretty simple stuff. You like it. And then probably they came back to this place every year and they said, oh my God, if we just get this crap out of the way, there's always more. And it was probably, some woman invented that. It's just like, oh, okay. And they came back. Pretty soon there was so much, there was too much to carry with them. They said, what are we gonna do? Well, it's very, come back next year, and then it was like wine or something. It was like, it was pretty cool. And then they said, why don't we just stay? They dug a hole, they got in, they tried to get through the winter, they harvested all the food they could, and started to rot, and they kinda got through it, because they got a little drunk, and it's dark, they got scared, this shit. And then they made it. And they said, oh man, okay, let's do that again. And then that's the invention of agriculture, and we live in the shadow of that. All of it is the shadow. This, the way we live, the way that this planet is these days, is because of the invention of agriculture, because people stayed in place. And once they stayed in place, they could accumulate stuff, and they could, pay people to become specialists, to do other things. Why, you use this broadsword and just keep an eye on this whole thing, and I'll keep food to your family, it's like, that was it. And that's what's been ever since. But everyone in this room is a specialist. What is your specialty, sir?
I'm a sailor.
You're a sailor? I'm a sailor. Wow, I grew up on Lake Superior sailing. At Erickson 29, sloop, rig, super nice. What kind of sailing? You do merchant marine. Merchant marine, okay, with actual sailing. Okay. I said, but anyway, talk about specialty.
Yeah.
I mean, he's not growing the food, because he's hauling the stuff around the world. And that's the specialist. Everyone in this room is a specialist in something, because somebody else is growing the food, and that's their specialty. And the invention of books, and written languages came from that, so we can store knowledge to the next generation by making it a code that we can hand to them. I mean, that's why things went berserk, And the agricultural evolution, agricultural society, we got the industrial society, which begat the information society, frankly. And that's been a disaster. The information society part. Thank you. But look at here, I don't know if you know this, but there are over 20,000 different named soils, just like plants and animals. 20,000 different named soils. There's a flow under this building, I looked it up before I got here, and I can't remember. There's an app for that. It's free. You go to the app store, first person to get this, load it on their phone, gets gold star. I'll wait. The soil under this building is called Hood. And we get the app there?
What's it called?
Hood. Oh, it's an alt-text capital zero. Oh, you didn't figure that out or something. No, it's called Soil Web. One word, Soil Web. And it geolocates to where you are, and then they know where you are. Look, this is the only reason to have a cell phone. This is the Soil Web app. Okay. And it's called Hood, which is an alt-text haplozero elf. It's an alpha sol, and it has 5 B horizons. Wow, there's a BA, a BT1, a BT2, a BT3, a BT4, a BCT, and a C. Well, T means clay, so it's pretty clayey. And it has an A horizon about 15, 20 years old. Anyway, and you should get to find out what your soil is at least mapped as, and then look at it and then dig a hole and see if it looks like that. And if it is, you can trust the data. Because sometimes, I'm a former president of the Oregon Society of Soil Scientists. 3 times I did that. And then tomorrow I'm going to the Hood River, our winter meeting in Hood River at the Best Western. Come join us for a field trip on Saturday. Thank God I'm not the president anymore. But super cool group, all just super incredibly. Nobody wakes up in 9th grade and say, "I want to be a soil scientist." They don't do that. What they do is they do something, and then they would do that, and then they realize, oh, it's all about soil. And then they come back and they become soil scientists, and that's this group of people is like the most interesting group you'll ever meet. And they mapped all the soils. They're the oldest guys that come to this winter meeting. They're almost all dead. The old crew. There's only like 4 that still were mappers in the 20th century. They went out and they mapped all the soils, and they found all the 20,000 different named soils. And look at, they all belong, those 12 soil orders all belong to one, I'm sorry, those 20,000 soil series all belong to one of the 12 soil orders. And I'm not gonna go through them all with you, but I just want you to look at them. On the left, this is a soil profile, meaning you dug a hole. And it's almost at the scale, real neat, so probably it could be a little bigger. Dug a hole, you looked at the wall of soil, and you can see these horizons right here. And what this is called is an aerosol. What do you think that means? Dry. And do rocks dissolve in dry air? No, they dissolve in water. So, are there a lot of nutrients being released here? No. Are there, is there a lot of biota there? Probably not. And look at, to live there, you're gonna look like that. And that's what a native plant is. A native plant is one that is adapted to the below ground environment. As much, if not more, than the above ground environment. So what happens here is it rains. Let's say this is 12 inches here. That's the soil thickness, that's it. It's only that thick, all the light has all the surface energy, carbon cycling, all that's happening in the thing that's 12 inches thick. And so when it rains there, which it rains about 6 inches, because soil is about 50% space. In fact, when you're gardening, you're not really gardening, you're ranching microbes, and really what you're doing is you're managing space. The space in between the particles of clay, sand, and silt, right? That's what you're managing, because large pores creating the force of gravity, small pores hold water against force of gravity, and you can affect that structure so that you could have good aeration and store water by minimizing disturbance growing. Cover crops, so much way to grow cover crops, you put roots in the ground. Roots go in the ground and then they get bigger, and they push the soil away, and then they go away. They go back to CO2, water, vapor, heat. What do they leave behind? A casting of the root, which has a large part, a medium part, and a small size part. And that keeps happening over and over and over. And you got well-structured soils, so you got a forest. That's what a forest is. And the deeper the roots go, the deeper the water goes. And the casting left behind allows for the next generation of roots to go deeper yet. And the water can go deeper, and the air can go deeper, the soil can get thicker. And it becomes better habitat for the next generation of plants which are gathering energy from the sun and carbon from the atmosphere. And that's what soil building is. That's why we're here, because there's enough soil building happening on this planet that there can be giant macroorganisms walking around on the surface terrestrial system with their own soil inside of you. That tube that's going through you is the soil inside of that tube, and you're feeding it the bugs and that, and they're oozing up their enzymes, which are allowing the nutrients to go into your bloodstream and get pumped to every cell in your body. You're just a big inside-out carrot. You put the soil inside you, and then you're living around it. You keep feeding it. Because if you stop feeding it, you know what it eats? You. It's waiting for you to die. This is not feeding us pretty soon. Then we get to the final course. Where a carrot is a tube that's living inside the soil that's sucking stuff in. You know what I mean? And the microbes outside are the external metabolism for the carrot to exist. And then you eat the carrot, and where does one end and one begin? Nowhere, man. It's all one or none. Actually, Dr. Bronner's is a sponsor of the OSU Organic Growers Club. I called him up, said, hey, will you sponsor this? And he told us about the club. Well, we're into that. Now we have unlimited amounts of Dr. Bronner's peppermint soda. I had 15 gallons of it in jugs, and I give it up to students, and I read the bottle to them. Dramatic readings. That's an aerosol. And look at it, rains 6 inches, and the salt dissolves out first. And where does the salt go? Down the pores, and it comes to about here and it stops raining. And then it dries out. And that keeps happening and happening and happening. Now there's a layer of salt there that never gets to the ocean. Because it doesn't rain enough for it to go down to the water table to go out to the ocean. And all the nutrients that go out to the ocean, right? They go out there and they make fish and all that stuff, right? So that's that. Here's a mollusol. A mollusol, this is what agriculture is based on, this soil. And this is in feet here. And this is all dark, you know why it's dark? Because there's a lot of organic matter in it, and how does the organic matter get down in the soil? By roots growing and dying, roots growing and dying, growing and dying, growing and dying, growing and dying. And now you've got this layer of dark stuff, but what is that? Mostly carbon and energy, and the bacteria, the fungi are recycling it right there, right? And making the soil better so that more organic matter can grow there. So more carbon from the atmosphere, more energy and sun can be accumulated in there. This is a battery that soil is a battery that stores energy from the sun and carbon to carbon bonds. This is like soil porn. If you're like a farmer, this is money is what this is. This is the basis of the economy that you all live around. It's the basis, it all comes from land and labor, and the rest is trade and theft. Know the difference, choose wisely. And an invention, you know, somebody invented this laser because they weren't growing the food. And that invention though could not be achieved unless somebody had a relative amount of security to be able to think about things. And how does that happen? So, extreme examples of two different kinds of soil, right? Under this building is an alpha sol, which is an awful lot like a mollisol actually. And where are most cities in the world? Where do they start? They start near rivers. Why is that? Because they flood. Why? Because they have, that's where the nutrients are, and they make good soils, and that's why people live where that's where the capital cities of the world are near rivers mostly. Plus they can transport their goods and stuff that way. So I mean, 1/3 of the ice of the Earth's ice-free surface, 1/3 of it is iridosols or inceptisols. And you might say, oh, look at this, it's kind of dark up here. But look at these rocks. Before you could do agriculture, you had to dig all those rocks out first. And once you did that, there's not much soil left. So this is not where the food's being grown. This is not where the food's being grown. That's 1/3 of the ice-free surface. In fact, all of the arable soils are in full production right now. And every 8 seconds, we're losing a hectare of soil due to other soil loss. And just desalination. You ready for that? Too bad. Yeah, every 8 seconds, there's 12 more people on the planet. And we're losing 2 hectares of soil every 8 seconds. You know what it feels like to be in the middle of the largest soil crisis ever in the history of humankind? You're like this. If you're us. Sorry. This, here, look at this. This is why. This is why we are us. Look at the mollisols that are green. You see that? The United States has 21% of the land mass of the United States is mollisols. Worldwide, it's 7%. That's all you need to know about why we are hanging out here in 7th Town Free Talk, right? Drove over the car, we got the hotel. We're out and get a greasy burger at Chips afterwards. Guy said the bar, so that's the place to go for late night greasy burger. So, yeah, man, see that? And there's one other place on the planet Earth that has almost as much, if not more, mollisols than we do.
Ukraine?
Not Ukraine, but more broadly speaking. Mother Russia. And that's what the Cold War was all about. They who have the mollisols have the advanced technology because they have advanced agriculture to make thermonuclear weapons to control the planet. It's not all good, Oregonians. You're not Oregonians. Making fun of Oregonians. Moved to Oregon, they said, it's all good, bro. What do you mean? No, it isn't. When you say that, you're saying it's all good for me. And I don't care about anything else. And it's like, I hate you guys, bro. And what do you, look up, there's Ukraine. It's like 80% mollisol. That's what that conflict is about. Well, Russia wants it back into the Great Bear. Right? Because it's power. That's literal power. The power of the sun is what it is. They who have the good soils. can gather more energy from the sun, which is actual power. And those who are in positions of power probably have no idea where their power comes from. Think about that. Yeah, sorry. Well, look where the trouble spots in the world are. That's where the iridosols are. Right? And you might think, oh, look at these are the frozen soils up here. They're called gelisols, like gelato. They're frozen. And you see this dark little, like kind of liverworts or whatever you want to call them. These little brown patches here. Those are peat bogs, or they're histosols, which are almost entirely organic. Because it's warm enough and sunny enough that stuff grows like moss. But it doesn't, when it dies, it doesn't decompose. So it grows, doesn't die, it doesn't decompose. Grows, dies, doesn't decompose, and it builds up. And they're like, hundreds of feet thick, these huge sphagnum peat moss soils. And they're almost 100% organic there. And you'll notice that they're contiguous with the frozen soils. Because the frozen soils are also histosols. They're just frozen ones. And for every increase in for every increase in temperature by 10 degrees, there's a doubling of biological activity in the soil. If we were to double our biological activity in this room, what do you think would happen to CO2 levels in this room? Sand. That's the real ventilation. And then these are the insectosols, and look at those are the alpha sols, they're a little bit colder. These are and you might think, oh, aren't the tropics like really good? No. Tropics, have you ever been to the tropics? Who's been to the tropics? Yeah, you flew there, they're like pretty cool. And they're like red and yellow and like purple, and what they are is mostly they're iron oxides. Because it's so wet and so humid and warm and humid, there's so much biological activity in the surface of the soil that the soils get leached out, and then all the nutrients go into the oceans. And you say, yeah, but what about the tropics? Because they're just scavenging on each other, and the biological diversity above ground is very high there, because the biological diversity is very low below ground. The minute a leaf falls in the tropics, before it hits the ground, it's being ripped apart by an ant, where the ant goes to being eaten by something else and shot out on the roots, right up the surface, the plants take it back up, and that's where the cycling of energy, carbon, and mineral nutrients is above ground. And the further higher up you go in latitudes, the deeper that goes into the soil. So finally you get to histosols, where it's mostly underground, and then it's frozen. You see that? So there's reasons why things are the way they are, but there's also just a lot of random geology. It's a random thing. Well, I mean, look at this. Look at the shapes of these things. We're like, oh yeah, that's the world. It's like, it doesn't have to look like that. It didn't look like that 500 million years ago. You know, look totally different. Anyway, so the tropics are actually really, once you cut them down, they don't come back because their nutrients aren't there. And all that biological diversity is gone and all that jazz. But anyway, kind of, perk you up. Fresh air. Bang on me. That's an oxidol of the tropics. And it's mostly just iron oxide. That's why barns are around. Because iron oxide is the most stable secondary mineral there is. Because it's iron and it's got oxide. It's not a primary mineral, it's a secondary mineral. Rust. And this one is called Molokai, which is the name of this series of 20,000 different names on it. This one's called Molokai. And the taxonomic class of Molokai is, read it with me, ready? 1, 2, 3, we're gonna do this together. 1, 2, 3. Very fine, kaolinitic, isohyperthermic, typic eutroptorox. Yeah, there's only 19,999 more learned. There they are, that's one of them. So this is and you read it backwards because it's soil science. And it starts with ox, that's how you know it's an oxisol. And tor means hot. And eutro means it's always hot, all the time. And it's a typical one. And it's isohyperthermic, which means it's really hot all the time. And it's a typical all the time hot oxisol. And it's kaolinitic, which is a special kind of clay it has. And this kind of, and what clay is, we're gonna dig into it in a second here, pardon the pun, but we are gonna go there. And clay is a secondary mineral, kind of like rust is. And this is a special kind called kaolin, and it's actually, kaolin is really good for making ceramics. Not particularly good for growing food. And then, all good? Yeah. And very fine means it's like fine texture, means it has really fine, small particles, so it has a lot of small pores, so it can store a lot of water. Let's see, we don't have oxasols and geosols, and we have, in Oregon, we have 10 of the 12 soil. Kind of amazing. It's a great place to study soil. That's because there's a lot of different diversity of geology and a diversity of climate, so there's a lot of diversity of organisms. And the 512 forming factors, you recall, Rachel? So, say the word. F minus. I actually saved all of the exams. I have everyone. What is our name? No, what is it? It's a one. Say the word chloro. Chloro. Remember chloro? Plant organisms leave parent material time. As a five set of master soil forming factors. Climate, organisms, parent material, the kind of rocks they are. What is that? Relief, how steep or flat is it? And time, how old are the different parts? Like it's really, there's a billion-year-old rocks out here. There's rocks being made, you know, uplifted out of the ocean right here. And there's volcanism that's pretty recent here. So those are the five soil forming factors that determine what kind of soils are where. And that's why, and look at, here's the Willamette Valley. That's Salem is the capital. Why? Because this is the site of the largest floods ever have known to have happened on the planet Earth. Happened here 15,000 years ago. Happened here. The Columbia Gorge was gorged out by giant floodwaters 15,000 years ago. The end of the last ice age, the largest, like when the ice sheets came down across all across the Canadian border, 51st state came across. And formerly known as Canada, across the Canadian border, and it blocked off the Clark Fork River near Missoula, Montana, and an ice sheet 2 miles thick blocked off a river the size of the Willamette River, and that basin filled up behind it, an inland sea. You couldn't sail on the sea. That was the size of Lake Superior. 500 cubic miles of water accumulated behind that ice dam, and it was 2,000 feet deep at the base of the ice dam, and the pressures were so great that it was squeezing out underneath of it and actually warmed up the ice enough to make like lava tubes through it, but ice water tubes going through it, and out the backside was water roaring out, and the whole thing catastrophically failed in one instant, and 500 cubic miles of water were aimed at this little part of the gorge. And it came roaring across the channeled scablands, ground them. Imagine 800-foot wall of water moving at 100 miles an hour with the consistency of wet cement coming at us right now. Just juice, everything. Just every particle of wood just shattered into like just dust. And just ground boulders the size of this building in suspension, just pounding the rocks down and grinding out the gorge. It overtopped the gorge by 100 feet, the water coming down this gorge. Millions of cubic feet per second. And carrying rocks from British Columbia that were in the glaciers get roared out and went out to the ocean. And some of them turned south right here and filled up this valley between this volcanism and this uplift, filled us up to 400-foot elevation, and it was an inland sea temporarily. For about a week it took to get up to 400 feet, and it's only about 200 feet at courthouse, and then it drained. And it didn't just happen once, it happened 100 times in a 5,000-year period. I stand Mark on Park Road, 500 years. I stand there, we just periodically did that. And carved the gorge out. And we would be underwater probably by 100 feet here. Because we're not at the top here, right? And we're not even close to the top of the gorge here. Yeah, every bit of this sand and silt and clay that's out in front of this little place right now came down that gorge. Insane. And that, all that ground up powdered basalt, the black fine grained mineral with all the nutrients and stuff, filled up this, like, frosted it in with chocolate cake frosting. And it all went up, and that's why this is the power, the political power is here because the agricultural power is there. Because of the largest floods that have known on the planet Earth, in there 15,000 years ago. I think anybody knows that? Who's in political power? I don't think so. Anyway, spotosols on the coast, the sand, ancient sand dunes, andisols, entosols, septosols. There's real soil doesn't come in a bag. Soil forms over time when rocks are partially decomposed in water and recrystallize into secondary minerals, and organic matter accumulates there with the energy of the sun and carbon from the atmosphere to build soil. And look at this soil. This is real soil. Look at, see that little crack there? That's not a crack, that was a root. The tiniest root hair you never saw because it's microscopic, went inside in between two pieces of clay, and then it grew and it pushed the soil apart and it made a bigger hole so it could drain. And so water would go a little deeper, and then it died and it went back to CO2, water vapor, heat, and left a little bit of ash behind. And the next generation recolonized that casting. And that happened over and over, and pretty soon started pushing around. Now we've got large pores, medium pores, small pores, and tiny pores. And that's what you're trying to do as a gardener or a land steward, is you're trying to use these basic properties that happen. If you just leave it alone, it's gonna self-organize. Of course, it's got all sorts of but not big weeds and all sorts of problems, so you gotta kind of remove that stuff, but give it half a chance and it'll work. Just stop doing harm. Don't till your entire garden to the consistency of finding soil to be able to put a carrot seed in the whole garden. Do that where you're putting in carrot seed, but where you're putting in beans, fava beans that big, you got a big chunky, lumpy, whatever, put some compost, spread it, frost it over with compost. Oh, it'll be fine. Yeah. Bottom line, soil is habitat. If you get nothing else out of this talk tonight, just internalize the reality that soil is habitat. And once you understand that, soil is a living thing, you know what to do to it, what not to do with it. Right? And that's just light years ahead from where we have gotten in the 20th century with regards to soil management. I mean, look at this thing. Look, here's a tiny little piece of soil. Like if you broke out the lead of your pencil, that size, maybe 1 millimeter by 0.5 millimeter. Look, there's a piece of sand. 2 millimeters down to 0.05 millimeters. Look, there's a piece of silt. 0.05 millimeters down to 0.002. And there's, you can't even see it, a little piece of clay, tiny little pieces of clay that are small at 0.002 millimeters. And look, this sand, there's 3 pieces of sand. This one came down the gorge. This one came from a volcano nearby. This one was brought in by a truck, right? And look, there's a body of water here held between the 3 little pieces of sand and it's being suspended. There's an ocean here. Look, there's a sea serpent living in there. That's trying to eat these things. They're powering here. These things eat the poop of that thing. These things are waiting for all these things to die so that these can eat them all. There's an entire ecosystem happening between 3 pieces of sand. That's why the soil diversity, the biological diversity of soils is so great, because the habitat is so diverse. This is a unique habitat right here. Look at, see this big space right here? That big space was once a root that went in there, pushed those pieces of sand apart, and now it's found by back to CO2, water vapor, and heat. And now it brings oxygen to this ocean because it drains there when the water goes down through it, when the air goes down through it. And look way up here. There's another body of water, different pieces of sand. Look at this giant root. You know what roots do? Roots leak out sugar water. And what is sugar water? What's it made out of?
Hydrogen and carbon.
Carbon to carbon bonds that have energy between them from, sugar is energy from the sun. And so this little sea of water right here has a lot more carbon and energy and mineral nutrients that are being brought by a root to it. And the root is saying, why would the root give away 10% of its photosynthesis to feed it to the bugs? Why? Because the bugs have the enzymes. What are the enzymes? Do they lower the activation energy for them to biodegrade the organic matter to release the nutrients so that the plant can grow? And that's symbiosis. And look, there's a fungi here that has a very intimate relationship here with this root here. And this fungi has orders of magnitude more surface area and can cover more ground to get more nutrients, to mine nutrients, to bring it from phosphorus that deep in this rock. It can mine that and give it to this plant. And what does the plant give it in return? Sugar, water, carbon, and energy. Right? I mean, and this thing here, look at. There's a line on the Serengeti up here, right? That's like trudging around. It's probably the keystone species of this entire aggregate. And down in this little crevasse here, there's some bacteria eating some organic matter. These bacteria, they reproduce every 21 minutes. And they're uniquely adapted to this space in the entire cosmos. That is a unique habitat right there. That's why the diversity of organisms is so high in soil, because the diversity of habitat is so high. And that is your job as a human on the planet, is to foster diverse habitat for soil organisms. And then all this flows from them. As long as the star keeps burning, it's gonna go out in about 4.5 billion years. We're cool. Don't worry about it. It won't be here. What is the soil? Is a living thing, not just a chemical sponge. And once you get that, you know what to do to it, what not to do with it. All right, so let's review. Soil is rotted rocks, dissolved rocks, and it's decomposed organic matter, right? And look, here's a little pie around, right? It's about half space. You see that space? And that space is either filled with air or water, depending on the size of the pores, right? And under ideal conditions, it's about half and half. And then the rest of it is either mostly minerals of different sized particles, and this little bit of slice of organic matter, 5%, which is actually a lot. So get a soil test and see what your soil texture is, see what the nutrients that are stored there, and see how much organic matter. If you've got 3 to 5% organic matter, you're doing pretty good. You want to maintain that. And the way to do that is to add some compost and grow some cover crops. And minimize disturbance, and you will have better soil. All right, so here's a piece of granite, same piece of granite, that's right up here. Look at this, like famous. And we zoom in on that thing, right, the different crystals. Dark crystal, as it turns out, the dark crystal is all first, because they're almost like salts, they're not, but. And then the red ones, and then the white ones, those are gonna be sand on the beach someday. And look at these different size particles. We're at the size of normal life on the planet. A piece of sand would be the size of this building 10 times over, but we'll just for safety purposes, like this, about this big. And then silt, this is 2 millimeters on 0.05 millimeters, is a rain. Silt, and it's just a rock, ground down, primary mineral made in the heart of the earth. Silt is just a smaller rock. It has been ground down to the size of 0.05 millimeters on 0.002 millimeters, just a rock. And clay, I don't know if you can see this. See that little dot there? That is the smallest pixel I can make on this screen, which is actually 50 times too big relative to these sizes. Enormous range of size in particles means there's an enormous range in the size of pores, which is the habitat, right? Sand is just a rock. Are you ready for this? Because we're going in. I know this is school time, okay? You can't withdraw now. It's too late. Okay? So buckle in. So sand is just a rock. It's small. Silt is a small rock. Clay is a different thing. Clay forms when rocks dissolve and then recrystallize at normal surface temperatures and normal surface pressures. It's called a secondary mineral. And it's made from the four most abundant elements in the Earth's crust. Do you know what they are? Oxygen, aluminum, iron, and silicon. And that's the four most abundant elements in the Earth's crust. And as it turns out, those four things, when they dissolve out in certain proportions, they can recrystallize, kind of like how salt dissolves and recrystallizes, kind of. And it recrystallizes, and it's not primary mineral, it's a secondary mineral. And it forms, and it can only get, it's a crystal that can only get to about 0.002 millimeters before it breaks. Or rocks can get big because they're high pressure, high temperature chemistry that made them, they're really strong. These are really fragile little minerals. So, clay is a secondary mineral that forms at normal surface temperatures and normal surface pressures. It is the product of dissolution and recrystallization. Okay? And it can only get to 0.002 millimeters before it breaks. And it's like a sheet. Imagine a sheet growing, a crystal. You've all done this in your mind, your children with crystals, right? And they're growing, and the edges, they're growing, and they're getting bigger, and it gets about this big, and then it breaks. And then it grows, and then it breaks. And it can only get to 0.002. But another thing about clay is those layers, they stack up like pages in a book. And how high can you stack the books until they fall over? About 0.002 millimeters into that size. And so, and the surfaces in the pages, that all counts as surface area. So if you take a thimbleful, does anyone know what a thimble is anymore? You will. It's coming again. A thimbleful of sand, if you were to take that, every particle of sand, and measure the surfaces of all the sand particles and lay them out flat contiguously, it'd be about that of a sheet of paper. Demonstrating it. Well, like that, both sides. Right? Bringing that. Okay. A thimbleful of silk has a surface area of about a yard, right? Like a big newspaper where you open it up, right? Maybe 2-3 feet, something like that. A thimbleful of clay has a surface area of a football field. A thimbleful of clay, all those little surfaces, it's incredibly hard to imagine, it's too bad. This is the reason you're alive, so pay attention, okay? This is how soil really works. This is why there are macroorganisms in terrestrial ecosystems. It's because of clay, a secondary mineral that forms when rocks dissolve and recrystallize the surface of the earth. Normal surface temperatures, normal surface pressures, made of those four most abundant elements of the earth's crust. And they have a giant surface area, but they're really small. Two different concepts, really, they're not related, okay? So it's hard to get your head around. New synapse connection, sorry, we call learning. And it's hard. You're like, oh, that's over. Okay. Get there. Okay, so review. Rocks dissolve in water. And what dissolves out of them? Silicon, iron, aluminum, magnesium, nutrients dissolve out. But the four most abundant elements in the Earth's crust also recrystallize at normal surface temperatures and normal surface pressures into sheets of a silica and aluminum oxide. They're kind of like oxides, like rust, right? Secondary mineral. These are special. These are silica and aluminum oxide sheets. Okay, so we're going in. So when a rock dissolves, this is most, oh yeah. Too bad. I can dissolve now. Someone come back here, because I know you guys. So, when rocks dissolve, silica and aluminum come out into solution, and silica has a certain size and a certain charge on it that forms covalent bonds with oxygen. In fact, it can bond with 4 oxygens and make a silica tetrahedron. Yeah, most people laugh at that. But and aluminum has a certain size and a certain charge that forms covalent bonds with 6 oxygens, in this case hydroxyl groups, but still oxygens, to form an aluminum octahedron. And they can share these oxygens to build the crystal. right? And so these things can share this and they can build a crystal. And that crystal, here's a silica tetrahedral sheet, here's the aluminum octahedral sheet, here's a silica tetrahedral sheet. This is called a 2-to-1 clay. This is the layer, and here's the next layer, and the next, and the next, and the next. There's 100 million of them that's stacked up to 2.002 millimeters. Here's the growing edge of the crystal as the dissolved silicon aluminum sometimes come out and they grow, they grow, they get to about 0.02 and they break apart. You got that? So that's what that is. So if we look, as it turns out, there are other elements in the soil solution, especially from dissolving dark colored rocks. And the dark colored rocks contain things like iron and manganese or magnesium. And manganese. And as it turns out, iron has almost the same size and almost the same charge as silicon, but not quite. But it still forms covalent bond with 4 of these oxygens to make an iron tetrahedron, and magnesium has almost the same size and almost the same charge to substitute into the crystal lattice work at the time of recrystallization. Now, the almost the same charge is the important part of that. Because in the absence of that, this is a charge neutral crystal. But when there's substitution at the time of recrystallization, the secondary mineral called clay, there is a negative charge left over. Sand doesn't have a negative charge. Silt does not have a negative charge. Clay has a negative charge when there's isomorphic substitution in the crystal formation. Right, so the same formation, isomorphic, same shape, size, almost. And so what happens is, here's your silica tetrahedral sheet, your aluminum sheet, silica tetrahedral sheet, and then in certain environments at the time of crystallization, net negative charges are propagating to the surfaces of that crystal. And what is the surface area of a thimbleful of clay? The size of a football field. Now we're talking, it has negative charges all over the pages in between in the book. And there's negative charges all over that thing. And that only happens in the environment where there are those other nutrients, those other minerals in the parent material. Right, so not all clays are the same, there's a lot of different kind of clays, but isomorphic substitution of a secondary mineral called clay is the source of negative charge in soil. Soil is a negatively charged thing. And you know what sticks to negatively charged things? Positively charged things. Oh, ironic. And you know what the charge on most mineral nutrients is? If you were guessing? Positively charged. Soil has a negative charge on it because of clay, which has a negative charge on it because of isomorphic substitution. Look, here's real, this is clay. And 100,000 times electron microscopy, which was invented by people who did not grow their own food. Okay? And you are sitting here tonight looking at it. It's coming out of a beam somewhere. The projector is behind. Kind of terrifying, okay? Look at that. And look at all the surface area. And there's net negative charges all over it due to isomorphic substitution, a secondary called clay. And that can store positively charged nutrients instead of washing away and going out into the ocean and becoming sharks. Because that's where all the nutrients end up. If there wasn't clay, there'd be plenty of seafood, but no one to eat them. You know? So look at this clay. Net negative charges all over doing isomorphic substitution, secondary called clay. Look at this clay. Look at the porosity of that. It's like 90% space. And where is the activity in soil? In the space. It has net negative charges all over due to isomorphic substitution, secondary called clay. Net negative charges due to isomorphic substitution, secondary called clay. Net negative charges due to isomorphic substitution, secondary called clay. Net negative charges due to isomorphic substitution, secondary called clay. Look at that clay. One atom at a time, dissolve on a rock and then recrystallize at normal surface temperatures and normal surface pressure to create, and when there's isomorphic substitution, it creates a negative charge on those surface areas. And that's every atom in your body was once stuck to the negative exchange complex on a clay crystal. That is a fact. Okay? Yeah. Heard? Who plots that? Weirdos. Weirdos. All right, together, we're all gonna say this together, you ready? The reason for the season, the reason you're alive is because net negative charge due to isomorphic substitution on the secondary mineral called clay is the reason you're alive. Yeah. I mean, look, here's some clay, look at the 2 to 1, hey, look at calcium, there's calcium, it's like, it's just electrostatic charge. It's not bonded, it's just like a balloon, you kind of charge it up and stick it to the wall. That's the kind of charge it is, it's just enough to keep it from washing off. It sticks there. And every atom in your skeleton was once an exchange complex of clay. Look at here, calcium, magnesium, that's nutrients. That's what fertilizer is. Why do you put fertilizer on the soil? To get the types of nutrients you want in the proportions that you want. And so you put it on the soil and it gets stuck into the negative exchange complex of clay. So it's there in the summer when the plant is getting bigger. Right? That's how it works. And in natural systems, the same tree lives and then dies and it releases the nutrients that can be taken up by the next generation of plants and they get deeper and they're more and there's more carbon dioxide energy from the sun. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. All right. Turns out there's one other thing in soil other than rotten rocks. Yeah. One other thing in soil that has twice the cation exchange capacity as the best clay. What do you think that is?
Decomposed organic.
Yeah, decomposed organic matter. Thank you. Who's doing that? Organic matter itself has negative charges in giant surface areas. So, what if you have a sandy soil and you don't have a lot of clay? What do? You don't add clay because you have organic. That's the answer. Add organic matter. Because you're not going to add clay. From whose dead cold hands are you going to get the clay to transport? Okay. It's easier to just never mind. Feel the land. Yeah. Kill the people. Yeah. Okay. Welcome. Okay. As it turns out, this tiny little sliver right here, that is made from the energy of the sun, carbon from the atmosphere. We know that goes around, this and that. Yeah. Here's what it looks like. It's a random molecule. Organic matter is a random molecule. That's why it's black. Because it doesn't reflect back any particular spectrum, electromagnetic spectrum, because it's at this complex shape and actually absorbs heat energy. You wear a black jacket, right? The sun is warmer. Dark soils warm up faster. The laws of thermodynamics determine the rate at which germination and growth happen. So dark colored soils have higher organic matter contents, therefore they have higher cation exchange capacity to store more nutrients, and they get warmer faster, and for every increase in your soil, you can increase your soil by 1% organic matter, you can store 25,000 gallons more water per acre. And when you're paying for pumping water, that's the difference between making a living or living or not. But look at this, a little piece right here is from the monkey's paw. This is from the tooth of a rhinoceros, like whatever. This is just a random molecule here. And it's got negative charges all over. Body increases soil, the cation exchange capacity of your soil. Stop like that. Yeah, okay, read another last few slides, so hang in, because this is wrapping it up. Here's how a plant works. This is not plants and how they work, but we're gonna do that right now for a moment. A plant eats the atmosphere to build these tissues, to push into the ground to create these kind of flat structure-y thingies here, whatever, they're kind of flat. And when the sun shines on those, they heat up and they evaporate. And when they evaporate, the water pressure inside the plant goes down and a partial suction is created, so water is pulled in. Right? And then let's look at, there's a large pore, medium pore, and a small pore. When this thing eventually dies and go back to CO2 water vapor and heat and ash. And the mineral nutrients are dissolved on the rocks and are stored on the exchange complex. And then, I don't know if you know this, but plants breathe at their roots. And they breathe oxygen. And so they inhale, literally, inhale, they take in oxygen and they exhale CO2, okay? That's an important thing, so hang on to that for a second. So now, here it is, look, here's a root. Look, here's a root hair. The tiniest root hair you never saw is in the smallest pore. And what's in a small pore? Water. And we zoom in on the root hair, and there it is, and look, there's soil. And it has a negative charge on it due to isomorphic substitution on secondary mineral called clay or organic matter coatings or whatever that are creating the negative charge. Look what's stuck to them. Nutrients. Here's something we gotta talk about new. Is the nutrients have +2 charges, +1 charges, some are big, some are small. And as it turns out, some of those are more strongly absorbed in the negative exchange complex than others. Here's the negative charge. If I have a giant sodium ion, it's like when you know when you take two magnets, not magnetism, but still, you take two magnets, and the closer they get, the stronger the attraction is, unless you turn around, right? And so that's called Coulomb's law. And the closer it gets, the stronger the force of attraction is. So the large ions, something like magnesium ion, it can only get this close. It's kind of, whoa, kind of stuck there. Negative charge, positive charge, and whoa, water's coming up, quite, all right. Where the potassium is smaller, so it can get a little closer, and it's kind of stuck there a little tighter, okay? So not all nutrients are stuck there with the same strength. Okay, now, here's the root. So they're stored there. Here's the root, what's it doing? It's exhaling CO2. And when CO2 goes into the water, it dissolves into the water. And maybe you know that, if you've ever put a can of soda, the bubbles come out. That's because CO2 is dissolved in the water at certain pressures. And so CO2 dissolves in water, and when it dissolves in water, it forms carbonic acid. And that's why it tastes kind of, it's got bite, right? You can taste the acidity in soda water, right? It's got bite. That's because it's forming carbonic acid. Carbonic acid further dissociates into hydrogen ion and carbonate ion. But look at it, hydrogen ion, this is it, hang it now. Hydrogen ion is the strongest absorbed of all the ions. It's more strongly absorbed than the potassium or the calcium or the copper. And so instead, so now this is hydrogen ion accumulating in the water. It's acidifying the water. That is what acidity is the amount of hydrogen ion in the water. The plant, during the summer, when it's laws of thermodynamics, it's warmer, things are growing, it's exhaling lots of CO2 into the water, it's acidifying the water. And the hydrogen ion is more strongly absorbed than the calcium ion is. And so the hydrogen ion goes, you're off, I'm on. And now the calcium is going, whoa, where am I going? It's being sucked in because of the partial vacuum in the plant. It's getting sucked in, it gets sucked into the root hair, goes up into the roots and becomes part of the structure, and then you ate it, and that's how your skeleton was formed. And that's how plants get the nutrients off of the exchange complex. Yeah? And that's what soil is. And that's how it works. Okay. Okay, so we'll zoom in. Look at this. Here's a pea growing in some actual soil. Zoom in, look at this. Here's a large pore being created by this part. Look at it. See those little, I don't know if you can see this, but that's like fuzzy little like mold-like things going into the small pores. Those are the root hairs. And they're going in with the waters and they're harvesting the nutrients. And the plant is breathing oxygen here and exhaling CO2 there. And it's releasing the nutrients. And where did the nutrients originally come from? No, the nutrients were rocks, there's all on rocks, and then some of those dissolution products form clay crystals, which could store nutrients. And then plants grew, And the residues of plants allow for storage of nutrients and themselves are decomposing and releasing nutrients. So that new plants can grow, and it's all being powered by solar energy. The whole thing is being powered, every beat of your heart, every blink of your eye, every thought that you're having now is energy that was harvested from the sun by plants that learned how to eat the atmosphere that lived in soil. And those are facts. Actual facts. Yeah, look at, wow, check it out, look at all these nutrients. NPK, calcium, molybdenum, look at, they get taken up by the roots, they came out of rocks. And they do things in the plant, really important, these little bits of minerals, they do things like, you know, responsible for enzyme activity, sulfur. Enhances maturity of small grains, you know, we eat grains, right, that's where the nutrients are. And then we eat them, and they do things in us. Think about it. Every blood cell in your body has a little bit of hemoglobin in the center of it, which is the gas exchange molecule. At one pH, it takes up oxygen and transports it. At a different pH, has a conformational chain that releases the CO2. So your oxygen, CO2, whatever you breathe out. But at the center of the hemoglobin crystal is what? Iron. And where did the iron come from? It dissolved on a rock. That's totally metal. I mean, God, it's like actually rock that ate spinach to get the iron into you for that to happen. And then, oh yeah, we all die. And it's almost over, and I do mean this stuff. And then it happens and it goes around and around and it just goes on and on, man, and that's how it is, that's how soil is, that's soil and that's how it works, so. I'll take some questions, but before I do. I do have to say, I do have these shirts for sale. Won't you please go to soilforward.org now? You know, you guys have been so patient up here and kind, let me just froth at you. It's like you get a free drink at the bar. That's what you get for being in the front row. So, 100% of the profits of these shirts go to funding my internship program. I get no support from the university, okay? 250 students have had summer interns that we have paid for ourselves by selling vegetables, by harvesting nutrients from the earth and this energy from the sun and carbon from the atmosphere. That's what value is. That's where it all really comes from, right? And I also happen to have them in Klingon and in Vulcan. And you know who the Klingons are. And you know who the Vulcans are. And maybe you're a little bit of both, so get them both. I have them in curvilicious shapes and also in the less curvy shapes. And I just have to warn you though. I know people who actually speak Klingon and Vulcan. And writing. And you gotta, if you're gonna wear this, just say it, people are gonna say, what's that? I'm saying, oh, this says SOIL, it says soil in Klingon, yeah. But that's not the word for Klingon, that's not the word for soil in Klingon, you know. So yeah, I know, dude, back up. It's a translation, so you just gotta make sure you understand that. It's quite a responsibility, you know, and this is the translation, because the actual word is cloth. And because Klingons need soil too, you know. Because they eat only meat, I don't know if you know that. And meat comes from somewhere, and it comes from plants. And the nutrients is all out of rocks and the thing around and the flex around and all that, right? And same thing with Vulcan, but they're not gonna be. Okay. So won't you please go to soilforward.org right now and buy a t-shirt for the kids, it's the future, the kids are the future. They are the future, we're all gonna get food. And they have to live here now. You think of us as more places like Granges. And thank you for inviting me, and I'd be happy to take a couple of questions. Yeah. Yeah,
Should you turn the soil?
right, so good question. Cover crops inject carbon and energy into the soil in the form of roots, so you can cut them. In fact, all of the most of the nitrogen is in the above ground biomass for a legume. You don't have to worry, it's not really in below. So you need, it depends on what you're growing next. The cash crop you're growing. If you want to, you take my class, my other class. And there's certain cover crops you can grow. Thanks a lot for coming, sorry, we went, we got to the actual end. But you're all gonna leave if you want to. I'm staying. You can grow some grasses that are very slow to decompose. You cut them down, you lay them down, you crimp them down, and then they form a mulch. And then you can transplant pumpkins on 6-foot centers between them, not have to water them. Right, and so that's a choice you would make. If you're trying to grow carrots there, you wanna make sure you're growing a cover crop that when you cut it down, it rapidly decomposes, and some of it are like barley decomposes very rapidly, no, oats do.
Always cut them, never
Cut them, never what?
never turn them.
Well, you gotta cut them first. And you gotta chop them if you really wanna till them in, because they're gonna be all stringy and stuff, and they'll just butter it up. So you wanna mow it, or flail it, or something like that. And then you gotta let it dry out a little bit, because it's gonna be kind of wet. And then you can carefully turn it, and a turning fork or a broad fork would work well for a smallish project. Now, I mean, I do this every week, every Thursday night, 4:30 to dark, at the student farm for the last 25 years, we feed them. I do the cooking, along with other friends, and post the people who graduated long ago. Last year at spring term, the second to last night, Thursday night during spring term, we had 90 students out there. So you get 90 students and 30 broad forks. You could turn up a garden the size of this room in 15 minutes. And that's what we do. And so they don't break a sweat, they're just working and having a good time anyway, there's not supper. And they're learning that they can do things without the man. You know, and we're squatting on the man's land who's squatting on somebody else's land. And we see the sun go down behind Mary's feet. So it depends on what you're growing next as to what you want to do. So you got a question over there? Someone?
Oh, yeah, but I guess that was a great answer.
Okay.
Because I have invasive clover.
Invasive flora, that can happen. Some cover crops are susceptible to becoming weeds. And they actually, there's a book, and it's free online for now. From Western SARE, SARE, with Sustainable Agriculture Research Education, what it's called, SARE. And it's called Growing Cover Crops Profitably, or something like that. And it's awesome, and I'd love to show it to you, but they have a chart in there that tells you all the different kinds of functions that different cover crops are good for and not good for, including potential for becoming weeds. So you should have read that book, but it's a great book, and it's free, and you can get a physical copy for $14. And it's really great, so it's I guess.
Yeah?
Yes, please.
You speak very highly of clay.
You do, but now here we go. If you are on airplanes, you're bitching about clay.
In Salem, we have a foot clay.
Yeah.
And.
What's the answer?
What is the answer?
What's the answer? And the reason you do that is because the organic matter, the little parts, eventually, we're not talking about sticks and leaves and stuff. We're talking like eventually it gets down to the black render and all that stuff. And it actually gets in between the clay particles over time. And then it loosens it up, and it takes about 10 years, so.
10 years.
So,
I think we're next.
yeah, it takes time, but it gets a little better all the time.
My grandmother used to lime the soil.
Liming the soil is primarily for changing the pH. This is super important. The master variable for soils is soil pH. And what that is a measure of acidity. Now imagine if there's a lot of acidity around, lots of hydrogen ions just in the soil. What do you think would be on the exchange complex? Nutrients? Mostly be hydrogen ion. And hydrogen ion is very strongly absorbed. So if you put fertilizers on, they're not gonna win the battle for the negative charge. So they'll wash away when you walk. So what you do is you add, just throwing out a number, 2 tons of lime per acre. Divided by 42,560 square feet in an acre.
Easy, pretty.
And then, well, super easy, 42,560, they were really good. 43,560 square feet an acre. So if you know you're gonna put 2 tons on there, you just divide by 43,560 and then multiply by the square footage of your garden. And that's how much land you put on. Huh?
Get your soil test.
And get your soil tested to see if you need, get, that, but what happens is the carbonate part of it has a chemical reaction. Not the calcium part, because the calcium is released as a nutrient. The carbonate has a chemical reaction with the hydrogen ion and forms water and CO2. And so now it's turned hydrogen ion into H2O. And so now you change the acidity of the soil. And the amount that you need to put on is determined by a number of things, but clayier soils are harder to change pH, so you have to add more in clayier soils, or soils that have a lot more organic, because they have more hydrogen. So you get soil test, thank you very much. $5. But gold star, I love it. Yeah. Oh, because I don't know what those are there, but I want to hear yours. What is your name? What? Jenny. Jenny?
Yeah, nothing.
Yeah, man. That's right. We met in the parking lot. You were distributing foods for the
Word farmers collective.
Gorge Farm Collective.
Yeah, well,
Really cool. And so you can change the pH, but you gotta get a soil test to find out if you need to, and your soil test will tell you how much lime you need to add. They'll usually give you recommendations to change the pH to around, 6 to 8 or something like that. Yes, sir.
Can you say something about the biochar?
Oh, yeah, man. Well, I'll say a little about biochar. What I will tell you about biochar is you don't need it. Unless you're on a sandy soil. Because it increases the cation exchange capacity of your soil, is one of the functions of it. So it's really important for people who have low exchange of low cation exchange capacity soils. And it's fun to make, don't get me wrong, so have a good time, but what it is, and you probably know this, is it's, you take wood, see you later, man, thanks, coming. I'll let the staff bring it. So, you take wood and you burn it in a low oxygen environment so that you harvest most of the energy that comes out in the form of heat and fire. But it doesn't completely turn into soot. And so it still has all of the wood structure in it, little cells and all that stuff, and it's light as a feather. And it goes up and you let it go up, stop burning. And now, it doesn't have a lot of energy in it, so bacteria and fungi aren't gonna be harvesting the energy from it and biodegrading it. So it's kind of like, doesn't wanna biodegrade because it doesn't have any energy. That's the only reason those bugs are doing that, is to get the energy. So if you extract most of the energy through pyrolysis under a low oxygen environment and preserve the structure of the wood, it has a giant surface area. Like clay, but it's not mineral, right? It's made from carbon. And most of the energy is gone. And so now it's got a giant surface area and it has negative charges all over it. So it is an exchange complex, it's an exchange medium similar to organic matter or clay, but it is this kind of stable organic matter that doesn't slowly go back to CO2, water vapor, and heat. You see what I mean? So making it, it's like, it's a certain oxygen depravity. And it's about 700 degrees C is the magic kind of number for keeping it from completely undercooking or overcooking, if you will. Right? So when you add that, like it's really important, like in oxazoles, which are mostly rust. They're fine, and they have kaolin clay, which doesn't have any charges on it. Because clay itself dissolves and recrystallizes and dissolves and recrystallizes itself. And every time it dissolves, a little of the impurities in the crystalline structure get taken up as a nutrient. And then when it recrystallizes, there's less isomorphic substitution in it. And in the tropics that happen so much, you end up with these clays that are pure. And they don't have any of the substitution, so they don't have a lot of the negative charge. So you might have clayey soils, which would be, but no charge. It'll be like a worse than both worlds, right? So you take biochar, which there's a lot of organic in the tropics, so you can burn that under certain conditions to create stuff called biochar, and then you put that in the soil. Now you've increased the kind of exchange capacity of a soil that has very little native kind of exchange capacity. So, or a real sandy soil or something like that. Good question.
Organic matter better than biochar?
Well, the great thing about biochar is that you get the energy out of it, but not a lot of carbon dioxide. So it's a way of extracting it, according to Dr. Marcus Kleber, who is our research scientist in the department. He's from Germany. And he's very precise about it. He's like the soul of science in our department, and he's retired next year. Anyway, he did all this biochar stuff. And he said, biochar is, you could only call it biochar if it does three things. If you get energy from it, and you get a medium that is an exchange medium, and you're reducing carbon into the atmosphere. If it does all three of those things, then you call it biochar. If it doesn't do only one of those things, he wouldn't call it biochar. And he's right. Just ask him. Dr. Marcus Kleber.
Did you just call it ash?
Huh? Yeah, you just call it soot. Sorry about that. You know, like the content. Maybe there's an ass joke. Anyway, was it? No. Any more questions? One on mine.
Question, could you speak to how one does no-till gardening?
Take my class, but I'll tell you, I did just say something about it, in that you would grow a cover crop, lay it down, and then transplant through it. And then then you get your stuff, and then you just bury it, kind of leave it on the surface, and you kind of do that over and over, and you can do that, but you're not gonna be growing carrots. Because carrots, who grows carrots here?
Yeah,
Yeah, a bit. I mean, because they're tiny, tiny little seeds, and they don't want to be too deep, and they don't want to be too wet, they don't want to be too dry, they don't want to be too cold, they don't want to be too hot, and they take 2 weeks to germinate. And they need the soil to be pulverized to very fine, structure. And then you're gonna they don't come up after 2 weeks, you do it again, and they don't come up after 2 weeks, that's it. No carrots, I mean, what are you gonna do? So I do pre-germination on my carrots, where you put them in a jar of water for 5 to 7 days, you can see a little radicle coming out, drain them, and then you take, for every cup of water, you take 3 tablespoons of cornstarch, and you cook that to thicken the water. And so it's like a little gel, let that cool down to bath water temperature. And then you pour the seeds in there and mix them in, and it evenly distributes in this goop, right? Called the goop method. And then I put it into a squirt bottle, like a ketchup bottle, and I make a little trough, and I just squirt it in there. It's about 1 inch, and it's in a gel. And the gel, the start is sugar essentially. You cover it up with water, and they come up about 5 days. In about 5 days, so probably.
Really?
Yeah, or they might take 2 weeks, but they will come up. Right, because the first thing a carrot does is put down a big root. You ever actually look, when these things come up, you actually look, oh, already roots are already down, they put down the root first and then they put up. Yeah, because they're, yeah, anyway. All right, so, yes, you can do that, no till, but you're not gonna be direct seeding small seed. Unless you have like a little.
Thank you.
So let's call it, what do you say?